You're more healed than you think. Carl Jung once said, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another. There is no recipe for living that suits all cases." Healing works the same way. It unfolds quietly, uniquely, and often without you even realizing it. Sometimes, the very peace you feel today is the proof of the battles you've already won. In this video, we'll explore the subtle, hidden signs that you've grown far more than you think. So as you watch, reflect on your own journey. What moment showed you that your spirit has already begun to heal? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's inspire one another on this path of spiritual wisdom and awakening. 1. Comfort in solitude. When you no longer fear being alone with your thoughts, you've entered one of the quietest and most profound stages of healing. There's a calm that comes when you stop chasing distractions and learn to find peace in your own company. This isn't loneliness, it's recognition. It's the moment when you realize that your mind is no longer an enemy, but a companion, and silence has become sacred instead of unbearable. Carl Jung once said that people will do anything to avoid facing their own souls, and yet here you are, sitting with yours without resistance. That is the essence of spiritual awakening. The moment you stop running from yourself and begin to understand that the peace you were seeking outside has always lived within. The journey into solitude used to feel like exile, a void you tried to fill with noise, validation, or endless movement. But now, solitude feels like home. You've met the parts of yourself you once buried: the pain, the doubt, the hidden memories, and instead of rejecting them, you've embraced them with compassion. You've looked into the mirror of your own consciousness and said, "I see you, and I accept you." That is shadow integration, the core of Jung's psychology and the soul of spirituality. It's the recognition that healing isn't about becoming flawless. It's about befriending every fragment of who you are. When you begin to enjoy your own presence, something miraculous happens. The constant craving for validation dissolves. You no longer need someone else's attention to feel alive. You stop measuring your worth by how many people notice you or how much noise fills your days. Instead, you become aware of the quiet rhythm of your inner being, the slow, sacred heartbeat of your own existence. You realize that solitude isn't emptiness, but space. The space where your soul can breathe, where intuition speaks, and where divine wisdom whispers truths the world is too loud to hear. This stage of spiritual growth doesn't announce itself with celebration. It doesn't look like victory or feel like revelation. It unfolds softly, like dawn light through a curtain, subtle, yet undeniable. You catch yourself at peace on a Sunday morning, unbothered by the silence that once made you anxious. You sit still, and instead of reaching for your phone or the next distraction, you listen. You notice your breath, your thoughts, your presence. And in that noticing, you meet something eternal. You realize that healing was never about fixing what was broken. It was about remembering who you've always been beneath the noise. To be comfortable in solitude means you've stopped fearing your own reflection. You've learned that even your pain carries wisdom, that your past no longer holds you captive, and that silence is the purest form of truth. The person who once couldn't stand being alone is now someone who thrives in stillness. And that, in itself, is the greatest sign of spiritual awakening. You are more healed than you think. not because the world around you changed, but because you finally made peace with the world within. Have you ever found peace in being alone? Solitude isn't emptiness. It's where your soul learns to breathe. If you've experienced a moment of comfort in your own company, share it in the comments so others can be inspired by your journey. And if you're still learning to embrace solitude, comment below. I'm ready to find peace within, so we can walk this path of healing and spiritual awakening together. 2. Triggers losing power. When the situations that once shattered you now only stir a quiet wave within, it's no longer a coincidence, it's a revelation of spiritual growth. You may still feel that brief ache when something brushes against an old wound, but it doesn't drown you anymore. It moves through you, and then it's gone. That's the soul's way of showing that the pain has been integrated, that the past no longer holds the authority to define your present. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And now, you're living the proof of that wisdom. The patterns that once pulled your strings are losing their power because you have stopped identifying with the story of your suffering. You've stepped into awareness of the sacred space where reaction transforms into response and chaos turns into clarity. You see, spirituality is not about becoming untouchable or emotionless. It's about reclaiming your peace from the places where you once lost it. It's about realizing that triggers are not enemies, but messengers, reminders of what still needs your compassion, not your control. When someone criticizes you, and instead of shrinking, you breathe and see their projection for what it is that's healing. When disappointment comes, and instead of despair, you remind yourself that life unfolds according to divine timing, that's maturity. The storms may still come, but you've built a foundation that doesn't collapse. You're no longer asking, "Why me?" but whispering, "What is this teaching me?" That subtle shift is where true spiritual awakening begins, when you stop chasing validation, stop rehearsing pain, and start living from inner trust. Each time you pause instead of react, you are rewriting your story. Each moment you stay calm, where you once would have broken, you are reclaiming your power from the unconscious. Healing doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It shows itself through your silence, your restraint, your ability to stand in presence without defending your worth. Your growth hides in these ordinary moments, in the grace with which you forgive, the ease with which you release, and the strength with which you stay soft in a hard world. And though you might not see it, every time you choose peace over drama, compassion over bitterness, awareness over impulse, you are living proof that your soul has evolved. This is the invisible beauty of spiritual growth. Not the absence of triggers, but the mastery over them. Not the end of emotion, but the transformation of energy. You have become conscious of the very things that once controlled you, and that consciousness itself is freedom. You are learning that healing doesn't mean forgetting the storm. It means remembering your strength. And through that quiet strength, your spirit has become untouchable, not by building walls, but by expanding beyond them. 3. Embracing paradox. You know you've reached a quiet depth of healing when you can hold contradictions inside you without falling apart. You can love someone deeply and still feel frustrated by them. You can be grateful for what you have and yet still dream of more. You can feel strong and still admit that you're uncertain. That's not weakness. It's the essence of what Carl Jung called psychological maturity, the sacred ability to be whole instead of perfect. Perfection is sterile, but wholeness is alive. It's the moment you realize that opposites can coexist in harmony, and that light can only exist because of shadow. Jung once said, "The paradox is one of our most valuable spiritual possessions, because it teaches us that inner peace doesn't come from erasing conflict, but from integrating it." There was a time when you might have thought healing meant becoming only calm, only kind, only positive. But now you understand that real healing is the ability to stand in the middle of contradiction without losing yourself. It's when you stop fighting your sadness and start listening to what it's trying to teach you. It's when you can forgive someone without denying the pain they caused. Spiritual wisdom isn't about choosing one side of life over the other. It's about seeing that both darkness and light are part of the same divine truth. The deeper you go, the more you realize that every emotion, even the painful ones, carries a message from your soul asking to be understood. Think about how far you've come. Once, you might have seen things in extremes, good or bad, success or failure, right or wrong. But now, you can breathe in the space between them. You've learned that life isn't meant to be solved like a puzzle, but embraced like a mystery. You no longer panic when uncertainty visits. You simply let it sit beside you and whisper its lessons. Jung believed that the path of awakening begins when we stop rejecting parts of ourselves. He wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And that's exactly what you've done. You've started to see your anger as passion misdirected, your fear as a signpost toward growth, your pain as a doorway to truth. When you can hold two truths at once without needing to choose, you've already stepped into mastery. You've discovered that you can be both tender and powerful, both grounded and wild, both human and divine. You've stopped chasing the illusion of being fixed because you now understand you were never truly broken. You were just learning how to hold your opposites in love. That's what Carl Jung meant by integrating the process of uniting the conscious and the unconscious, the sacred and the flawed, until they dance together as one. So when you find yourself loving and doubting, forgiving and hurting, surrendering and resisting all at once, don't rush to correct it. Just notice it. That's your soul evolving quietly, growing stronger in silence. Healing isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks or revelation. It's the slow expansion of your capacity to hold life as it is. The moment you can say, "I am both," and feel peace in that truth, you have already touched the heart of spiritual awakening and embodied the rare spiritual wisdom that Carl Jung spent his life trying to illuminate. Comment below, "I embrace the paradox," if you're ready to find peace in life's contradictions and see how your inner growth has been quietly unfolding all along. 4. Freedom from projections. When you begin to awaken spiritually, something remarkable happens. You stop letting other people's opinions shape your reality. You no longer live under the weight of their judgments or carry their insecurities as your own. You start to see clearly where you end and others begin. As Carl Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. That simple truth becomes a compass for your awakening. You recognize that when someone projects their fears onto you, it has nothing to do with your essence and everything to do with their unhealed pain. You no longer absorb their energy. You let it pass through like a wave dissolving on the shore. What once felt like a personal attack now feels like information evidence of another person's inner struggle, and you move with quiet awareness rather than emotional reactivity. This is not detachment born from indifference, but wisdom born from clarity. You start to feel when someone's words carry the vibration of their wounds. Instead of defending yourself, you remain centered. Instead of explaining your worth, you rest in it. This is the power of spiritual awakening. It refines your boundaries without hardening your heart. You realize that not every criticism deserves a response, and not every projection deserves your energy. People can only see you through the filters of their own consciousness. Their perception is not your responsibility. The more you embody this truth, the freer you become. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." But when you see projections for what they truly are, you stop living by other people's unconscious stories and start living by your own awareness. That is emotional sovereignty, the ability to remain rooted in your own energy no matter what others send your way. True healing, as Jung taught, doesn't arrive with fanfare. It doesn't announce itself in loud transformations. It happens quietly, almost invisibly, in the moments where you would have once been triggered but now remain calm. You might still feel the old sensations rise, the pulse quickening, the urge to explain, but instead of reacting, you breathe. You witness. You choose peace over chaos. That's how you know growth has happened. Not because you stopped feeling, but because you learned how to stay centered through the feeling. Your silence becomes strength. Your boundaries become sacred. You realize that self-respect is not about building walls. It's about knowing the value of your energy and protecting it with love. Through this stage of spiritual awakening, you stop needing everyone to understand you. You stop performing for approval. The praise no longer inflates you, and the criticism no longer wounds you. You exist in a deeper rhythm now, one guided by inner truth rather than outer validation. The judgments of others no longer define your identity because you have learned to define yourself through presence, awareness, and compassion. This is freedom from projections, the kind of freedom that can't be taken away because it comes from within. It's the moment you realize you are no longer who the world told you to be. You are who your soul has always known you were. In that realization lies one of the most profound signs of hidden growth Carl Jung ever described. The awakening of a consciousness so radiant that the shadows of others can no longer touch your light. 5. Dream transformation. One of the most revealing signs of inner healing is when the tone of your dreams begins to change. You may not even realize it at first, but the chaos that once filled your nights slowly turns into calm. The fear that used to chase you becomes curiosity, and the darkness that once swallowed you starts to open into light. This is not a coincidence. It is the voice of your unconscious reorganizing itself after years of inner conflict. According to Carl Jung, dreams are the purest expressions of the soul. They are messages written in the language of symbols, showing us what words cannot express. When your dreams begin to shift from chaos to exploration, it means that something deep inside you has started to trust life again. Perhaps you used to dream of running away, of being lost, of facing shadows you could not escape. But now, instead of running, you stand your ground. You walk through that same dark forest, not as a victim, but as a seeker. You enter the same house that once terrified you and discover that behind its locked doors are rooms filled with warmth and light. These changes are not just about the dreams themselves. They are evidence that your psyche is healing, that your soul has accepted its own wholeness. This is what true spiritual growth looks like: silent but profound, invisible but powerful. It happens beneath the surface, as your unconscious mind learns to live in harmony with your conscious self. Healing does not always mean that the pain disappears. As Jung said, healing is not about curing, it's about making whole. You may still remember your wounds, but they no longer define you. The energy that once created nightmares now gives birth to symbols of renewal. The same emotions that once overwhelmed you now become guides, leading you toward deeper understanding. In this new stage of spirituality, your dreams become a sacred classroom where the soul teaches through imagery and feeling. They reflect your progress more honestly than your waking mind ever could. When you dream of reconciling with someone who once hurt you, or when an old fear no longer makes you panic, it's your unconscious celebrating its peace. The dream world becomes a mirror of your inner harmony, showing that your spiritual awakening has reached a new depth. You no longer need to fight or flee. You are able to observe, to feel, and to let go. The boundaries between darkness and light begin to dissolve because you now understand they are both part of the same truth. Your unconscious is not your enemy. It is your oldest companion. And as you heal, it starts to trust you again. The chaos in your dreams settles because your inner world no longer needs to scream to be heard. The fears that once haunted you now transform into symbols of wisdom. You might wake up remembering a dream where you fly, swim in clear water, or walk through golden light. These are not random images, but the language of your soul telling you are safe now. This transformation in your dream landscape is a reflection of your spiritual growth. It shows that the layers of your being, body, mind, and spirit, are beginning to move in the same rhythm. The more peaceful your inner world becomes, the more harmony you will see both in your dreams and your waking life. The night no longer hides your fears. It reveals your healing. And that silent transformation, often unnoticed, is one of the clearest signs that you are far more healed than you think. Leave your like and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any powerful insights that awaken your dreams into transformation. Comment below, "I am transforming through every dream," to affirm your journey toward hidden healing and spiritual growth. 6. Peace with the shadow. You've stopped fighting your darker impulses, and that's one of the clearest signs you're far more healed than you think. There was a time when you might have seen jealousy, anger, or selfishness as proof that something was wrong with you. You tried to suppress them, hide them, or pray them away, thinking that being spiritual meant being spotless. But real healing, as Carl Jung's Spiritual Wisdom reminds us, isn't about erasing the darkness. It's about embracing it. Until you make the unconscious conscious, Jung once said, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. When you stop denying those hidden parts of yourself and begin to understand them, You stop being ruled by them. That's when your shadow starts transforming from a prison into a source of profound insight. The moment you can observe your anger without being consumed by it, when you can feel jealousy without letting it poison your peace, you reclaim a power that's deeper than self-control. It's self-awareness. You begin to see that every emotion has a purpose, that your anger often points to your boundaries, your jealousy reveals your suppressed desires, and even your selfishness teaches you to protect your energy. Through this understanding, what once felt like weakness slowly becomes wisdom. The fire that used to burn you now lights your path. The emotions that used to shame you now show you where you still need love. Jung believed that there is no coming to consciousness without pain. And through that pain, you've begun to awaken the light that was hidden within your own darkness. You've also noticed that life no longer triggers you the way it once did. The people or situations that used to send you into spirals of self-doubt or emotional chaos now meet a calmer, wiser version of you. You no longer react. You reflect. You don't rush to prove your goodness or defend your worth, because you've realized that true peace doesn't come from appearing perfect, but from being whole. That's the essence of spiritual awakening, the quiet understanding that you can hold both light and shadow without rejecting either. You stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "What is this teaching me?" That subtle shift is the mark of inner maturity, the moment when your shadow no longer controls you because it no longer needs to. Carl Jung taught that every person contains both divine light and sacred darkness, and the integration of the two is what leads to transformation. As you learn to make peace with your shadow, you begin to see how everything you once judged in yourself was actually guiding you toward wisdom. Your sensitivity becomes compassion. Your guilt becomes empathy. Your past mistakes turn into understanding. Even your wounds begin to glow softly with meaning. This harmony between what you once loved and what you once feared within yourself is the very definition of healing. You may not have realized it yet, but your quiet acceptance, your calm response, and your ability to find light in what once scared you, all of that means you're already more healed, more awake, and more whole than you ever thought possible. 7. Renewed meaning. You begin to sense that life has quietly come back to life within you, not through any grand achievement, but through the sacred simplicity of being. There's a calm pulse of meaning behind even the smallest actions: when you breathe, when you listen, when you smile for no reason at all. This is the silent sign of deep healing. You are no longer chasing happiness. You are embodying it. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." And in this awakening, you realize that spirituality isn't about escaping reality, but falling in love with it again. You start to find joy, not in doing more, but in being more present. There's a quiet richness in washing a cup, feeling the warmth of sunlight, or simply existing without needing anything to prove your worth. The noise of the world fades, and a deeper rhythm begins to move through you, a rhythm that feels ancient, peaceful, and alive. The more you awaken, the more you notice that purpose is no longer something you must chase. It begins to flow naturally when you create from the heart, when you serve without needing recognition, when you connect with others and feel the pulse of shared humanity. The divine is no longer distant, It lives through your hands, your voice, your breath. You can feel the invisible harmony between your inner world and the outer one, as if life itself has become a mirror reflecting your healed energy. Jung believed the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And now that truth lives inside you, you no longer seek to become someone else. You simply allow your truest essence to unfold. In this deepened state of awareness, patterns start to appear where before you saw only randomness. Synchronicities begin to weave through your days, small moments that seem too perfectly timed to be coincidence. You think of someone, and they call. You feel lost, and the right message appears in front of you. You sense that something, somewhere, is guiding you. This isn't wishful thinking. It's the universe responding to your healed vibration. You are finally in resonance with life itself. The language of the divine has always been timing, alignment, and intuition, and now you are fluent in it. You start to understand that divine timing was never working against you. It was shaping you. Every detour, heartbreak, and silence was part of the sacred choreography of your becoming. Jung said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain," and now that truth feels real. The pain that once felt unbearable has turned into wisdom. The moments that once broke, you have become the very soil where compassion grew. You no longer curse your past. You honor it, for it built the foundation of your awakening. You see how the pieces fit, how everything had meaning, and how your spirit was never abandoned, only refined. Now, even the ordinary feels miraculous. You find beauty in quiet mornings, depth in simple conversations, and gratitude in the smallest details. The world hasn't suddenly become easier, but you have become softer, wiser, freer. You are no longer surviving. You are creating, connecting, and existing with awareness. You can feel the universe, or consciousness itself, breathing through you, guiding you with every beat of your heart. This is what real healing feels like, not perfection, but presence. Not constant happiness, but quiet peace. Not needing to prove that you're healed, because your very existence radiates it. You realize that spirituality is not somewhere you go. It is what you are when you remember your wholeness. Life begins to feel sacred again, and that is the ultimate sign of your spiritual awakening. We hope this reflection on finding renewed meaning through hidden healing has inspired you to see your journey with fresh eyes. If you're ready to rediscover purpose and align your life with deeper spiritual wisdom, comment below, "I'm renewed." Your engagement helps us share more insights that awaken growth and understanding within you. Sometimes healing doesn't look like joy or clarity. It looks like peace where there used to be pain, silence where there used to be chaos. You're more healed than you think, and every quiet step forward is proof of your unseen growth. If this message resonated with you, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you won't miss our upcoming videos about inner transformation and the hidden power within you. The 7 deadly boundaries that make empaths immune. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Carl Jung. Welcome to Spiritual Wisdom. Today, we're diving into the 7 deadly boundaries that make empaths immune, the powerful inner shields that turn sensitivity into strength and emotional intelligence into unshakable self-mastery. As you listen, I invite you to reflect on your own life. Which of these boundaries do you already practice? And which ones do you feel called to strengthen? Share your thoughts in the comments below so our community can learn and grow together. Let this be the moment you reclaim your energy, protect your peace, and rise into the most empowered version of yourself. 1. Refusal of emotional responsibility. The refusal of emotional responsibility is one of the most powerful boundaries an empath can ever establish, because it marks the moment you finally recognize that someone else's emotions are not a weight you were born to carry. This single shift becomes a turning point in spirituality and spiritual awakening, pulling you out of the lifelong pattern where guilt, fear of disappointing others, and the unconscious desire to keep the peace have shaped how you show up in the world. For so long, you may have absorbed the emotions of others as if they were your own, believing you were responsible for their reactions, their moods, and their internal storms. But the truth is that their anger belongs to them. Their sadness belongs to them. Their disappointments belong to them. And none of these emotions are yours to fix or hold. When this clarity finally clicks, something inside you awakens something strong, calm, and deeply rooted. This boundary becomes even more necessary when you understand how many people, intentionally or not, use emotional projection as a way to avoid facing their own inner conflict. Without this boundary, an empath becomes the default emotional caretaker in every relationship, constantly over-explaining, apologizing, adjusting, shrinking, or softening themselves just to keep others stable. But once you embrace the truth that you are not responsible for anyone else's emotional landscape, the guilt that used to control you begins to lose its power. You stop feeling obligated to solve problems you did not create. You stop walking on eggshells to protect fragile egos. You stop confusing compassion with self-sacrifice. And for the first time, you can love people from a place of clarity rather than fear. As this boundary settles into your life, you start seeing the difference between being supportive and being used, between caring for someone and carrying them, between empathy and emotional servitude. People who once relied on your emotional labor may resist, question, or even accuse you of being distant. But this resistance is only a sign that the old pattern is breaking. You are not becoming harder. You are becoming whole. You are not becoming selfish. You are becoming sovereign. Your spiritual awakening teaches you that taking responsibility for what is not yours only keeps others dependent, unhealed, and disconnected from their own growth. By stepping back, you are not abandoning them. You are allowing them to meet themselves. This boundary does not make your heart colder. It makes your presence clearer. You can still listen, care, and hold space, but you do so without absorbing the emotional chaos of those around you. You recognize the subtle moment when someone tries to make their feelings your burden, and you return that energy gently but firmly, telling yourself, "This is theirs. It is not mine." With each repetition of that truth, your aura becomes stronger, brighter, more stable, and undeniably powerful. You stop being pulled into emotional storms that were never meant for you, and instead, you stand rooted in your own inner ground. And from that place of alignment, you discover that the most sacred form of empathy is the one that honors your energy, protects your peace, and allows your soul to finally breathe. If this message resonates with you, comment below. I release what is not mine to carry. 2. Prohibition of over-explanation. The prohibition of over-explanation is a boundary that protects your emotional clarity and strengthens your spiritual development, especially if you are an empath who naturally absorbs the feelings and expectations of others. When you state a boundary, once calmly, clearly, and without hesitation, you reclaim your power, because every additional explanation weakens your position and quietly teaches others that your no is open for negotiation. Over-explaining becomes an invitation for others to challenge you, push you, or manipulate you, not because you are wrong, but because people sense that you feel obligated to justify your feelings. And when people feel they are owed a justification for your personal truth, they will keep digging, questioning, and pressuring you, turning your emotional openness into a tool for their benefit. That is why you must remind yourself that your boundaries do not require a debate, a defense, or a lengthy story. They simply require your confidence. As Carl Jung said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. And often, the individuals who refuse to accept your boundary the first time are the same individuals who lack the emotional maturity to face their own limitations. When you over-explain, you are not being kind. You are allowing someone to avoid their own accountability. As you step deeper into spirituality and spiritual development, you begin to recognize that explaining yourself too much is a subtle form of self-betrayal. It signals that you fear being misunderstood, rejected, or judged. Yet the more you explain, the more you give away your inner authority. A strong boundary needs only your clarity, not your justification. And when you embrace this truth, your presence becomes more grounded, your communication becomes more direct, and your energy becomes less available for people who drain it. Speaking once and standing firm trains your nervous system to trust your intuition rather than other people's reactions. It teaches your heart that your emotions are valid even when no one agrees. It teaches your mind that peace is more valuable than being liked. And it teaches your spirit that self-respect is not something you earn, it is something you embody. With each moment, you resist the urge to explain. You pull your power back into yourself. Your relationships become cleaner and more honest, and you naturally attract people who understand and respect you without requiring extra words. The lesson is simple but transformational. Your boundary is not a request, it is a statement. Your truth does not need defending. Your peace does not need approval. And the moment you stop over-explaining, you step into a higher state of self-trust that strengthens every part of your life. 3. Tolerance of disappointment. When you develop the strength to tolerate someone's disappointment without rushing in to soothe them, rescue them, or fix the situation, you step into a level of personal power that most empaths never reach, because you finally understand that disappointment is not harm. It is simply a reaction to unmet expectations, and those expectations were never your obligation to fulfill in the first place. People may sigh, become quiet, look sad, or subtly withdraw in hopes that you will bend. But their emotional responses are not proof that you've done something wrong. They are simply expressions of their own desires, and you are not required to rearrange your entire life every time someone else feels a temporary discomfort. Carl Jung said, The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And this boundary demands exactly that, accepting your right to disappoint others when protecting your energy, your time, and your truth requires it. You begin to understand that the fear you feel when someone is disappointed in you is not intuition, it is conditioning, old emotional programming that taught you that your value depends on making everyone else comfortable, even at the expense of yourself. As you face this truth, you start to see how easily people can control you when you cannot hold steady in the presence of their displeasure. Because the moment you feel responsible for fixing emotions that are not yours, you hand over your sovereignty, your choices, and your identity. You may think you are being kind when you rush to soften their disappointment, but what you are really doing is teaching them that all they need to do to influence you is show a little sadness or frustration. This is how many empaths lose themselves, not through dramatic manipulation, but through small, subtle, emotional cues that keep them stuck in the role of caretaker, peacekeeper, and emotional buffer. Spiritual wisdom teaches you that compassion is not the same as self-sacrifice. Compassion says, I see your feelings, while self-sacrifice says, your feelings are my responsibility. And those paths lead to entirely different lives. When you stop absorbing disappointment as if it were danger, you reclaim the emotional space that was always meant to belong to you. You begin to realize that people who truly value you will respect your boundaries even when they feel disappointed, while those who only valued your compliance will resent your growth. This boundary becomes a filter, revealing who is connected to your soul and who is connected only to your usefulness. And as you practice holding steady, you become grounded in a deeper inner truth, the kind of psychological independence Carl Jung described as individuation, where you no longer shape yourself to meet expectations that drain your spirit. You understand that disappointment is a normal, necessary part of human relationships. It builds emotional maturity, resilience, and honesty. And by allowing others to sit with their own discomfort, you are giving them the opportunity to grow instead of enabling emotional dependency. With time, you will feel a quiet empowerment rising within you, a sense of freedom that comes from knowing you no longer have to twist, shrink, or betray yourself just to keep the peace. You begin to make decisions based on your values, not on someone else's reactions. You start saying no without explaining yourself to exhaustion. You show up authentically without fearing who might disapprove. And slowly, your entire life transforms, not because others changed, but because you finally stopped letting disappointment, guilt, and emotional pressure control you. Stay connected with our spiritual wisdom community by subscribing to the channel. Here, we grow through every challenge, rise above disappointment, and learn to protect our energy with strength and clarity. Remember, you are a resilient soul, worthy of peace, purpose, and the powerful boundaries that keep your spirit aligned. 4. Separation of care from compliance. You can love deeply, care sincerely, and hold compassion in your heart without feeling obligated to obey every request or demand that comes your way. Because one of the most powerful realizations in spirituality is that care and compliance are not the same thing, and confusing them is the very trap that exhausts empaths and slowly dims their inner light. When you begin your spiritual awakening, you notice how easily compassion can turn into self-sacrifice when you believe that kindness must always be followed by obedience. Yet the truth is that genuine care loses its purity the moment it becomes an obligation. This is why empaths must learn to pull apart these two ideas: care as a voluntary expression of love, and compliance as a conditioned response rooted in fear, because only when they are separated can you give from your soul without draining your soul. Care comes from your heart, but compliance often comes from pressure, guilt, or a long history of being rewarded for pleasing others. And when these two merge, you begin to believe that saying no makes you unkind, selfish, or cold, even though refusing something that harms your peace is one of the most sacred acts of self-respect. Empaths especially struggle with this boundary because their sensitivity makes them aware of others' discomfort, disappointment, or frustration. And this awareness tempts them to surrender their own needs just to avoid conflict. But spiritual wisdom reminds you that peace built on self-betrayal is not peace, it is suppression. And the more you suppress, the further you drift from your spiritual awakening. When you finally understand this, you begin to differentiate between caring for someone and carrying someone. And that shift becomes a turning point in your emotional life. People who have grown accustomed to your compliance may react when you begin to draw this boundary, interpreting your newfound clarity as rebellion or distance. But this reaction reveals their true intentions. They never valued your care, only your availability. Yet those who genuinely appreciate you will celebrate your growth, respect your limits, and meet you from a place of balance rather than dependency. This contrast becomes an invaluable filter in your spiritual journey, allowing you to see who resonates with your soul and who only resonates with your service. To truly separate care from compliance, you must pause before responding, breathe before agreeing, and ask yourself whether your yes comes from sincerity or from fear. You learn to feel the difference in your body. Care feels peaceful, warm, and open. Compliance feels tense, heavy, and pressured. And as your spiritual awakening deepens, your intuition becomes sharper, guiding you toward choices that honor your energy instead of depleting it. This boundary transforms the way you love by making your love cleaner, healthier, and rooted in freedom rather than obligation. Over time, you stop apologizing for protecting your peace. You stop feeling guilty for resting, and you stop believing that compassion requires self-abandonment. You realize that your energy is a sacred resource and that not everyone is meant to receive it. You understand that saying no is not cruelty, it is clarity. And you finally recognize that your care is most powerful when it is given from fullness, not fear. Because when you no longer tie your compassion to compliance, you step into a level of spiritual wisdom that makes your empathy unbreakable. 5. Elimination of preemptive accommodation. The elimination of preemptive accommodation is one of the most powerful boundaries you will ever learn. Because when you constantly try to meet people's needs before they even express them, you unconsciously teach them to expect endless service while slowly draining your inner energy. When you rush to help before anyone asks, you blur the line between kindness and self-erasure, turning yourself into someone who carries responsibilities that were never spoken, chosen, or agreed to. And in the long run, this habit creates relationships where you feel overextended unappreciated, and unseen, while others become increasingly comfortable taking without ever needing to ask. That is why Carl Jung's insight, your vision becomes clear only when you look into your own heart, is so important here. Because unless you bring your awareness back into yourself, you cannot recognize how much emotional weight you carry simply because you assume someone might need something. Eliminating preemptive accommodation is not about becoming cold or less generous. It is about giving yourself permission to stop acting on imagined expectations and start responding only to what is real, spoken, and mutually understood. This boundary forces you to slow down and let other people use their own voices instead of relying on your intuition to save them from every discomfort. It teaches you to release the urge to anticipate needs so quickly that you lose contact with your own needs, your own peace, and your own spiritual center. And as your spirituality grows and your spiritual development deepens, you begin to see that real connection cannot thrive in a space where you constantly overfunction while others underfunction. The moment you stop stepping in automatically, something begins to shift. People either step up and learn to articulate what they want, or they disappear because the unspoken benefits are gone. Either outcome reveals the truth of the relationship. You also begin to reclaim your energy because you no longer leak it into situations that require mind reading, emotional guesswork, or silent sacrifice that no one ever acknowledged in the first place. Letting others ask for what they need is an act of equality, not selfishness. And choosing to respond only when there is a clear request honors both you and them. It allows you to engage from a grounded state rather than reacting from anxiety, fear of rejection, or the old belief that you must overgive to be valued. This shift helps you rebuild relationships on clarity rather than assumption, on honesty rather than anticipation, and on mutual respect rather than silent emotional labor. And when you give from this place, your presence becomes more authentic, your boundaries more defined, and your energy far more protected, allowing you to participate in the world without losing yourself in the process. Declare your power today by commenting below, "I no longer shrink myself for others." Let this truth settle into your spirit as you step into healthier boundaries. And if this message speaks to you, share it with someone who needs the courage to stop over-accommodating, because empowerment grows when we pass it on. 6. Refusal of emergency status. Not everything is an emergency, and the moment you truly understand this, your entire inner world begins to shift, because most of the crises you've been carrying were never yours to hold in the first place. As an empath, you've been conditioned to respond to every raised voice, every trembling emotion, every sudden message, and every sigh of distress as if the universe itself is collapsing, and you are the only one who can hold it together. But this habit collapses your boundaries and keeps your nervous system in a constant state of alert. Carl Jung, whose teachings form the backbone of true spiritual wisdom, reminded us that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. And often, they hand you their panic precisely because they don't want to face it themselves. When you internalize this truth, you begin to see how many so-called emergencies are nothing more than emotional pressure disguised as urgency, projected onto you by people who never learned how to self-regulate or take responsibility for their own inner storms. And this is where your transformation begins. Because when you stop reacting instantly, you are not becoming cold. You are becoming conscious. You start retraining your nervous system to pause rather than panic, to observe rather than absorb, to ask yourself quietly and powerfully, is this truly urgent? Or is someone trying to make me feel responsible for what they've left unresolved? This single moment of clarity changes everything, because you no longer jump at every vibration of fear around you. You decide when and how to respond. And as this boundary strengthens, you begin noticing how often urgency is used as a subtle manipulation, sometimes intentional, sometimes unconscious, by people who rely on your empathy to fix what they refuse to confront. You stop allowing others to turn their emotional disorganization into your urgent responsibility, and you start seeing how heavy your life became simply because you inherited other people's unprocessed chaos. With each step, you reclaim more of yourself. The pressure in your chest loosens. Your breath deepens. Your mind becomes clearer because you are no longer living inside someone else's storm. You discover that urgency is rarely real. It is often an illusion created by people who fear silence, accountability, or discomfort. True emergencies are rare, but emotional emergencies are constant for those who refuse to grow. When you refuse to participate in them, you're not abandoning your empathy. You are elevating it. You are shifting from reactive emotion to conscious compassion, the kind of compassion that does not require you to sacrifice yourself to prove your goodness. This is what spiritual wisdom truly looks like. Responding with clarity instead of rushing. Listening with discernment instead of collapsing into panic. And learning that you are allowed to take your time even when others demand you hurry. And as this boundary settles into your life, something extraordinary happens. People stop being able to control you through pressure. Their fear no longer dictates your actions. Their urgency no longer directs your energy. Their chaos no longer becomes your responsibility. You stand rooted, steady, grounded, no longer the empath who absorbs everything, but the soul who sees clearly, chooses wisely, and commands their own presence. This is the deadly boundary that makes empaths immune. Because once you master it, emotional pressure loses its power, and the world around you can no longer shake what you have rebuilt within. 7. Implementation of exit protocols, the keystone boundary. The implementation of exit protocols stands as the keystone boundary because it determines whether every other boundary you set will hold their shape or quietly collapse under pressure. And for an empath who feels deeply and loves sincerely, this boundary becomes a spiritual safeguard, a line drawn not in anger, but in clarity. It means having firm rules for when you will leave a relationship, a conversation, or any environment that pulls you away from your inner truth, and honoring those rules without hesitation when the conditions are met. Because in spirituality and spiritual awakening, integrity with yourself is the highest form of self-respect. An exit protocol is not a threat, a warning, or an emotional performance. It is a private agreement you make with your own soul, a structure that protects you from the subtle erosion that happens when you stay too long in places where you are unheard, unseen, or undervalued. This boundary becomes necessary because empaths often give second chances, like they are part of their breathing, offering grace even when it is undeserved, hoping for change even when the evidence is missing. and extending their patience long after their emotional energy has been drained. Without a clear exit rule, compassion becomes a doorway through which disappointment constantly enters. That is why the keystone boundary teaches you to define the moment when leaving becomes the only path that protects your spirit. It might be after one violation, or two, or three. What matters is that the standard is yours, not someone else's persuasion or guilt. As Carl Jung taught, a person's true liberation begins the moment they refuse to betray themselves. And this principle echoes deeply within the heart of an empath who is awakening from the patterns that once kept them stuck. Exit protocols give you emotional safety because they eliminate the exhausting internal dialogue of, should I stay? Should I try again? Did I expect too much? Instead, the rule stands firm, like a lighthouse guiding you back to your own power. It removes the temptation to rationalize harmful behavior, and it stops you from shrinking yourself in order to keep a connection alive. By honoring your exit boundary, you teach your subconscious that your needs are non-negotiable, that your energy deserves protection, and that your heart is not obligated to tolerate what wounds it. This is where spiritual awakening strengthens your intuition, helping you sense when a situation is no longer aligned with who you are becoming. When you practice this boundary, your nervous system begins to trust you again. Your inner voice grows louder. Your energy rises because you are no longer trapped in emotional recycling, hoping that someone else will finally offer what they have repeatedly shown they cannot give. You learn that leaving is not failure. Leaving is choosing truth over illusion, alignment over attachment, and self-preservation over self-sacrifice. This quiet power changes the way people treat you because they sense that your empathy is supported by a backbone, your kindness is supported by standards, and your heart is supported by boundaries that do not crumble under pressure. With consistent practice, exit protocols strengthen every other boundary you build. Your communication becomes clearer, your tolerance becomes healthier, and your relationships become more respectful. You attract connections that honor your presence instead of draining your spirit, and you naturally distance yourself from those who rely on your softness to excuse their lack of accountability. Over time, this boundary becomes a spiritual compass, protecting your peace, elevating your growth, and guiding you toward a life where your empathy is your strength, not your vulnerability. Affirm your strength today by commenting below. I honor my exit protocols, and I protect my peace. Let this affirmation guide you as you step away from what drains you and step toward what strengthens your spirit. Trust that every boundary you enforce elevates your spiritual wisdom and aligns you with the life you are meant to walk. At the end of the day, these 7 boundaries aren't about pushing the world away. They're about finally protecting the light within you. As Carl Jung taught, true strength comes from honoring your inner truth, even when others don't understand it. When you embrace these boundaries, you stop absorbing everyone else's chaos and start living from a place of clarity, confidence, and spiritual freedom. If this message spoke to you, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. And make sure to turn on the notification bell so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Your journey to deeper awareness and empowered empathy continues, and we're here to walk it with you.